So we understand that Theresa May, over 5 hours of impassioned debate, managed to hammer out an agreement with her cabinet last night on the deal. What chance does she have of getting Labour support?
Well, we've read and analysed all 500 pages. It's a miserable failure of negotiation. You've got huge detail on things like the backstop. That's the bit the government says it doesn't intend to use. And then you've got just 7 pages on the future relationship, which is the bit the government says it does want to get onto. And so the future relationship is vague in the extreme. I mean, to ask Parliament to sign up to this with no idea where it's heading, I think is an ask too far.
But isn't this, in her eyes, something to stabilise so that you can begin dealing with future relations, trade deals and all of that? Isn't that sort of the point of it?
But in the future, I mean, the whole point is, where are we heading with this? We've run out of time for this bit of the negotiations, so we need a transition period. But the transition is a bridge. Where are we bridging to? And you've got 7 pages, I kid you not, 7 pages on the future relationship, and only 3 of those on the economics. And they're vague in the extreme. Even some of the stuff that the Prime Minister has been saying the last 2 years is all stripped out of it. We've no idea where we're going. The only thing that's clear from it is that trading, whether it's manufacturing or services, is going to be much harder in the future than it is now. I don't see how anybody could sign up to this.
What she has been clear about is it's this deal or no Brexit at all. Well, how clear is...
I've never accepted... I mean, honestly, to say to Parliament, to say to the nation that you've got this sort of second-rate document in detail about a backstop that won't be used and this thin, vague, blind future, and to say you've got to take this, notwithstanding that it's wholly inadequate, or you get worse.
OK, but what she's saying is these are the options. I believe in it heart and hand, in a sense. Take it or leave it. She obviously wants people to take it. What is Labour's position? Because you have said, haven't you, that there is a chance to rope back on Brexit. There is a chance to relook at it. Your leader, Jeremy Corbyn, says there isn't. Yeah, so are we clear what Labour's position is? Can you spell it out for us?
I'll come to that, but honestly, today is about analysing this document and passing judgment. And you've already had reaction, I've seen on your programme, both politically and in the public. It is simply not acceptable for the Prime Minister to say this may be wholly inadequate. It may actually be a bad deal.
We get that. We get that you believe that. I think, though, as the opposition party, what would be really helpful is people had a sense of choice on what Labour's position was.
Yes, we've said that we think we should have an economically close relationship with the EU for the future relationship, and we've said that that ought to be a customs union, a proper customs union with, a comprehensive customs union, because that's the only way to protect manufacturing, and a single market deal that means you don't have to have checks at the border. This document envisages that it will be more friction at the border in future. So this is the first trade deal or proposed trade deal in history that will make it harder to trade, not easier to trade. And we just need, that's a big ticket item, to say to Parliament, sign up to something that will make trade more difficult. It is an incredible thing to ask.
What we have heard so far, Sir Keir Starmer, is that actually the city and business are relatively cautiously optimistic about the situation at the moment, certainly for the next couple of years through this transition period. They're the ones that are saying there's some stability because that things aren't going to change too much for a few years. And as we go through that transition, we can then work on the detail of what happens when eventually we're out.
No, I understand that, and I can assure you over the last 2 years or so, I think I've spoken to about 1,000 businesses in ones or twos or groups, and to try and get a sense of where they're going. They are really worried about no deal in March. They are pleased that there's a transition that at least holds the fort for a year or two, and I've no doubt that that is the base of their optimism, or at least their cautious optimism this morning. But I doubt, and I'll carefully analyse, that any of them are saying that as for what comes after that, that they're satisfied with what they see on this document. So I think it's a sigh of relief that we're not, that, you know, there's something after March in a transition period that doesn't look different from now. But we've known that for months and months and months.
But what you have to bear in mind, though, if you've spoken to all of these businesses and you understand that they have a nervousness about a no-deal scenario, if you and the Labour Party vote down this option to choose, what Theresa May has said is that's going to plunge us into the no-deal scenario that you are all so terrified of, and business, as you've been speaking to, is so terrified of. That's the responsibility that all of you have now, isn't it?
Well, but I don't accept that false choice, and I don't think parliamentarians do. I think across the House, all parties will reject that. There are MPs that have spoken to me from across the House, including government MPs, who've said we're not going to countenance no deal and we're not going to take this false choice. It really, I mean, I think if you just said to people, take the politics out of it and said, is it right for the Prime Minister to say, here's my deal, it's not very good on analysis, but if you don't like what's not very good, you're going to get even worse.
But this is a deal that's taken 2 years or so to hammer out. It's not a deal that she's come up with overnight. This is a deal where she's had to negotiate, go to the EU, come back, listen to...
I appreciate that, but the checkers, she didn't put a proposal on the table until a few months ago. So the first many months were spent fighting around the cabinet table. So the actual negotiating period was very short. And at the end of 2 years, as you say, what have we got on the future relationship? 7 pages. 2 years. The future relationship is the most important thing. What are we actually heading for? After 2 years, 7 pages. I mean, honestly, I think you'll struggle to find anybody who says that is a good product of 2 years' worth of negotiation.
One of the headlines this morning, I'm quoting it, I haven't got it just in front of me, it's something like split cabinet, split government, split nation. Could you add to that, though, split opposition? Because when ordinary people in the midst of this are looking around for clarity...
What we did as a party was work at our party conference to try and get an agreed position that everybody could get behind. And we did that. And we said we will judge the deal on its merits according to our test. That's what we're doing today.
Well, you said something and Jeremy Corbyn said something different.
Yeah, you said, Keir Starmer, you said the Brexit can be stopped, and Jeremy Corbyn said categorically that it can't be stopped. So
it's not really an agreement, is it?
No, I think Jeremy's clarified the position, but just let me run through it because it is important people know our position. And I've talked to Jeremy, and this is absolutely clear. It's our conference position. We look at the deal and judge it on its merits, which is what we're doing today, and it's not good enough. If it's voted down, when we come to vote on it in a few weeks, we will, of course, call for a general election. There ought to be amidst this chaos. If that doesn't happen, options ought to be on the table, and one of the options is a public vote. That was unanimously passed at our conference. Jeremy agrees with it, I agree with it, and it's Labour Party policy. Now, I accept that, when we all do interviews...
So why did he say different?
Well, when we all do interviews, we explain things in different ways, but there is nothing between us on this. And today is all about the first bit of that exercise, which is what do we think of the deal that we're now being presented with? And that's the analysis we're going through today.
That's not very reassuring, though, is it, Sir Keir Starmer, to hear you say, well, when we do interviews, we all explain things differently. Surely, at this point in time, when there's so much on the line, everybody needs to be clear and everybody needs to be pulling in the same direction.
Let me then just try it one more time, because this is exactly what we agreed at conference. There's nothing between Jeremy and me. We judge the deal on its merits according to our tests. Very clear about that. If it doesn't get through, we ask for a general election. Very clear about that. If there's no general election, all options on the table, including the option of campaigning for a public vote. You may agree with that, you may disagree with that, but you can't say it's not clear.
OK, just one last thing. What we understand, and I'm sure you're aware of this, that there's sort of 11 ministers that are all considering their position this morning, that there could be enough people and enough letters for a vote of no confidence in Theresa May. If that was launched and suddenly Theresa May lost her job, how do you think that would affect this situation? I mean, it's a volatile political moment for all of you. Perhaps lots of people saying the most important decision that maybe all of you will make in your political careers. Do you think that's something that would be helpful right now if Theresa May was to lose her position as Prime Minister?
No, of course it wouldn't. It'd be a chaotic ending with just weeks and months to go. But what the Prime Minister hasn't done is get her party or her cabinet behind her. Now, you could say, well, it's impossible for her to do so because they're so divided. What she therefore could have done as an alternative is to get Parliament behind her by saying at the beginning of the exercise, I'm going to ask you, Parliament, to vote on my objectives. So at least I'm reflecting what the majority in Parliament want. But she didn't do that. So she didn't get Parliament behind her, didn't get her party behind her, didn't get her cabinet behind her. And therefore, we're in this position. It's a chaotic ending. And the root cause is the utter division on the Conservative benches.